You are listening to the Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
Welcome. If you're working anywhere near tech right now, especially with data, it probably feels like you're in a sprint that just never ends.
Oh, absolutely.
Every single week there's a new framework, a new AI model, or, a critical security alert that just has everyone scrambling. It's relentless.
But it's also, you have to admit, pretty exhilarating.
It is. So today, for our Product Thursday focus, we're going to try and cut through some of that noise looking squarely at the data landscape.
And we've found a really interesting pattern.
Our whole mission here is to just deliver the clearest insights. And what you're seeing is that the industry is shifting its focus.
Exactly. The headlines are all about the incredible speed of AI, but underneath all that, companies are realizing their foundations are starting to crack under the pressure.
So it's less about the next shiny new tool.
Much less.
Yeah.
And much more about strengthening the, let's be honest, the boring systems that everything else is built on. It's a return to rigor. So let's unpack that.
That's a great place to start, the boring stuff.
Yeah, and we saw this prediction for 2026 that just framed it perfectly. It said, the biggest progress in data infrastructure won't be some new flashy database.
Right.
It's going to come from simply better plumbing, foundational improvements.
That makes so much sense. The hardest work is almost never the most visible work.
Yeah.
It's all about interoperability, sustainability, and maybe most importantly, maintenance. Open standards are becoming like core infrastructure now.
Absolutely. Which means engineering effort has to pivot.
Right. And there is no better example of that pivot than the lessons coming out of a huge platform like Patreon.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're serving over 10 million members. What is it, 50 terabytes of data?
50 terabytes of production data. And their big strategy for this year is all about two concepts: perfective maintenance and brownfield evolution.
Okay, so let's break those down. Brownfield evolution. That's like renovating a skyscraper while people are still living in it, right?
Exactly. You're not starting fresh. You're improving a complex live system.
Yeah.
And perfective maintenance is about cleaning up the internal structure.
Not just fixing bugs. It's about tackling that code debt, the architectural messiness.
And the reason is brutal. 50 to 80% of all software costs are just ongoing maintenance.
That is a staggering number.
It's the cost of an engineer spending a week debugging a problem caused by some quick fix from 6 years ago.
And to make that even more real, let's look at the ultimate piece of boring essential plumbing, PostgreSQL recovery.
The thing that's supposed to just work? How does it actually happen under the hood?
It all comes down to write-ahead logging, or WAL. Whenever you change something, Postgres writes it to the WAL file first, not the main storage.
Okay, so it's a log of intentions.
A log of intentions, exactly. So if the system crashes, the main data files might be a mess. On restart, Postgres just looks at the WAL. It finds the last clean checkpoint.
And then it just replays everything from that point forward.
It replays every record from that checkpoint's radio point. That process is handled by a core function called perform WAL recovery. It brings the database to a consistent, known good state.
So the real magic isn't just storing data, it's the system's ability to reliably rebuild itself after a catastrophe.
Precisely. And that same mechanism is what you need for crash recovery, for rolling back to a specific point in time, and for keeping standby replicas in sync. It's invisible until it's not.
Speaking of things that can't fail, let's switch from consistency to just pure speed, because there is a serious speed war happening right now.
Especially in analytics. You've got tools like DuckDB and Polars going head-to-head.
It's a fascinating race because it's not just about raw speed.
No, it's highlighting the difference between being fast in memory and being resilient enough for actual production.
So why is DuckDB pulling ahead? Where's Polars hitting a wall?
It's really about that scale resilience. DuckDB is just built to handle real-world messiness. Its developer support and integrations are great, but the architecture is the key.
We saw this one benchmark that just laid it bare, a 1 terabyte Parquet aggregation test.
Right, on a machine with 64 gigs of memory, which is, a pretty standard setup.
And Polars just fell over, ran out of memory, every time.
Every time. Meanwhile, DuckDB finished the whole job in 19 minutes. No issues.
And its secret is the streaming execution and that disk spill capability, right?
That's the secret sauce. It's built to survive when data gets too big for RAM. It doesn't just assume everything will fit nicely.
And that focus on specialized resilience is also popping up in some really interesting niche tools.
Definitely. Like this new thing called Squirreling. It's a tiny SQL engine designed to be browser first.
So for like interactive queries directly on the client side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Using async streaming and late materialization, it solves that one problem incredibly well.
But if we zoom out from the engines, the performance bottleneck is also the storage itself. You mentioned this idea of a future-proof file format.
Yeah, F3. The problem is that formats like Parquet and ORC were brilliant, but for a different era. They were designed for simpler, structured data.
And now we have these massive, wide tables for machine learning, multimodal data mixing, text and images.
And the old formats just can't handle that strain. F3 is built for that complexity. It's self-describing, and critically, it uses embedded WebAssembly.
WebAssembly. So the file itself can adapt to new data types.
Precisely, without breaking older readers. It's arrow native, and it's built because everyone knows today's file standards are tomorrow's AI bottleneck.
Which brings us right to the biggest shift of all, how AI is completely refactoring software engineering.
It really is a foundational shift. I mean, we're talking about a change maybe bigger than moving from assembly to high-level languages.
Because it introduces non-determinism.
Exactly. We were all trained that code gives you the same result every time. Now, with LLMs, the outputs are probabilistic. That forces a completely new mindset.
So what are these new habits engineers need? Where are you seeing LLMs add real practical value day to day?
They're incredible accelerators for fast prototyping, for navigating a new tech stack without reading tons of docs, or, and this is a big one, understanding some ancient legacy code base.
It just cuts down that initial friction.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
But the danger is relying on it too much.
Right. This idea of vibe coding.
Don't do it. It's where you just accept the output because it sort of looks right.
Yeah.
You break the learning loop. The code might run, but you don't actually know why it works.
And if you don't know why, you can't debug it, you can't secure it, and you can't maintain it.
Which is why the best advice we've seen is this. Treat AI output like a pull request from a really productive but kind of dodgy teammate.
I love that. So you have to review it hard, test it relentlessly.
And refactor it constantly. That's the new engineering reality.
That new reality is exactly what we try to explore here on Vocal Technologist, and that pace. It's definitely having a psychological effect. We keep hearing that programmers are just feeling behind.
How could you not? AI is refactoring the job so quickly, it's unsettling to see how fast the goalposts are moving.
And that speed forces a really important question. If AI is taking care of the basic coding and data fetching, what's left for us? What's the next bottleneck?
You'd think it would be something like data volume or compute speed, but it's not. The real bottleneck now is problem framing and sense-making.
So it's not about getting the data, it's about asking the right questions in the first place.
Exactly. Most people still just use data to pull simple facts. The real lasting value is turning that data into clarity. That's the human part.
And even when you have the right question, using AI at enterprise scale creates its own new problems, like the knowledge decay problem in RE systems.
RE is amazing, but it fails at scale if the knowledge is stale. Your fancy model will just confidently give you the wrong answer based on outdated information.
So you need systems with real-time ingestion, retrieval, that's what, freshness aware?
Freshness aware,
Yeah.
and constant monitoring to make sure you're not poisoning your own output.
We're also seeing these very specialized foundation models emerge to deal with more traditional data.
Yeah, a great example is TabPFN 2.5. It's a transformer model built specifically for tabular data.
Which is where most enterprise value still is, right? In tables. How does it change things?
Well, for one, it can handle serious scale up to 100,000 rows. But the game changer is the low latency, zero-shot inference.
Zero shot, so you don't have to retrain it for every new data set.
You eliminate that entire step. It's trained on 130 million synthetic data sets, so it has this incredible generalized understanding of table structures. It's ready to go out of the box.
And I'm guessing it plugs into existing tools.
Seamlessly with scikit-learn. And critically, it has built-in interpretability, so you can actually explain why it made a decision. It's a real challenger to models like XGBoost.
And that all comes back to using AI for real insight. We saw that GDLT example using Gemini to analyze a full day of global TV news.
Right. And the key there was the prompt structure. It was so tight that it compelled the model to produce analytical insights, not just summaries.
But even with that, the limitations are still there.
Oh, yeah. Hallucinations still happen. And the idea that you could save money by just feeding it a table of contents instead of the full text, that didn't really pan out. You still have to pay for the compute.
Okay. We need to shift gears pretty dramatically here. Back to our first theme. Solid foundations. Because there's an urgent security alert we have to talk about.
Yes, this is critical. It's a vulnerability called MongoBleed, or CVE 2025-14847.
MongoBleed sounds bad. What's the danger?
It's extremely dangerous. It affects MongoDB instances that use lib compression, and it allows for unauthenticated memory disclosure.
Unauthenticated, so an attacker doesn't need a password or anything.
Nothing. They can just pull credentials, personal information, whatever is in the server's memory, right out. It's a complete break in confidentiality.
Wow. Okay, so what versions are affected? Who needs to act right now?
If you are on any major version of MongoDB before the latest patches, so if you're behind 8.2.3, 7.20, 0.28, or 6.2 or 0.27, you need to patch immediately. This is not something to put off.
And if you're worried you might have already been hit, is there a way to check a forensic signature?
Yes, a very clear one. The attack signature is massive bursts of connections that have no client metadata.
Why is the missing metadata the key?
Because a legitimate connection, even a failed one, has that metadata. This exploit is just a low-level probe throwing garbage at the port to trigger the leak. The traffic numbers are just wild.
And what's the difference we're talking about?
Legitimate traffic might be, say, 3 connections a minute. The attack is over 100,000 connections a minute. If you see those massive metadata-less spikes in your logs, you've been hit.
That really brings us full circle. We've gone from the non-glamorous but essential work of post-RESTful recovery and Patreon's maintenance,
All the way to groundbreaking, non-deterministic AI that needs that solid foundation to even function.
The whole data world is consolidating its foundations and exploding with new capabilities at the exact same time.
And the takeaway really is that the most boring engineering is often what keeps you stable, and the most exciting AI needs the most rigorous human oversight to keep it safe.
So what does this all mean for you, for your workflow? We've seen that an automated AI pipeline can reliably handle the data fetching. It can even generate startup ideas. So if the agents can solve the data consumption part of the job and even the idea generation part, what is the one strategic question? The one that needs real human clarity and that difficult problem framing? What question is left only for you to ask?
That's the question we'll leave you with. Thanks for joining us for this look at the latest shifts in technology. Keep questioning where you can provide that uniquely human value.
Spoken Tech for your ears.